Okay, we talk about Pettersson and Hughes a lot on this show, but today we got to give some love to the third line centers, okay? So today, coming up on Locked On Canucks, we're going to talk about the best third line centers in Canucks history and then the best third line centers in the NHL today. Let's get into it, baby. You're listening to Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and thanks for hitting the play button on today's episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, Canucks writer and part-time credentialed media member for Daily Hive Vancouver. And before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you for listening to Locked On Canucks. It's your team every day, your Canucks every day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, Kyle, today's episode is about the best third line centers in Canucks history. I got to tell you, man, it was a struggle to come up with it. More on that later. First and foremost, how you doing, buddy?
Okay, get this, Canucks fans, okay? You know who could have been the best third line center in Canucks history? If you think about it, Mark Chouinard. How do you say his last name?
Chouinard.
Yeah, remember him? They signed
one
him
of
with
the
Willie
best.
Mitchell, right?
One of the worst trade deadline additions in Canucks history. Wow.
I don't even think it was I don't think it was a trade deadline. I think it was a free agent signing when they signed Willie Mitchell. It was the year they traded for Luongo. Come on, Trevor Beggs. Anyways, Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bound, Locked On Canucks.
All right.
Your Canucks every day, man. The sun is shining. A lot less smoke in the air. I can't even see any smoke. It's crazy how things can move that fast in this thing called life. On that note, though, we're sending way too much love. Actually, there's no such thing as too much love to our people in the interior, man. For real. It hit home this time, so it's different. And I always say this too, man. For real, the big reason why we're doing this, Locked On Canucks, the big reason why we're doing everything in the studio. So you got to do it ASAP, and that's give back to the neighbors. And then we can give back to the world, okay? It's got to go in that order, IMO. Anyways, again, Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs, Locked On Canucks, a position that gives back a lot to the team based on what that person has to do. A lot of pressure. And on great teams, even if they get paid a good amount of money, most of the time they're exceeding that value because they got to do a bit of everything. And that's the third line center on a great team. Especially in the playoffs, you can argue that the third line center is as important as the second line center.
100%. I think you're not winning the cup without three good centers at least, and I'll kind of get more into that when we look at like the best centers in the NHL going into next season, because a lot of those guys are making quite a bit of money. Pius Suter is definitely on the budget end of third line centers. But in terms of the best third line centers in Canucks history,
It's
and
Pius,
Kyle, you and I
Pius
start
Suter.
thinking about this.
It's Pius Suter, okay?
Pius,
Come on,
yes,
you son of
sorry.
a Trevor Beggs, man. It's okay, man. It's okay,
I
man.
even
get it,
I
man.
even wrote about that. 7 fun facts about Pius Suter. Go check it out on Daily Hive. That was one of my fun facts. It's pronounced Pius.
Oh, they
but the
mentioned that
people
on
know, okay?
Sick Harrison Price, actually, your article.
Oh, they mentioned on Scares and Price. Oh, so nice, buddy. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, no problem.
So again, maybe Pius Suter can become one of the best third line centers in Canucks history. But honestly, Kyle, this is a tough list to come up with. So I'll start by saying that NHL didn't start tracking ice time data and face-off data until the late 90s. So when we look at the Canucks being around since 1970, come on, I wasn't born, or I'm watching old tapes. I wasn't an expert on the Canucks back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that's the caveat there. With today's NHL, obviously I've watched them more, but it's easier to see based on ice time, based on who's taking face-offs, who's really the third line center on the team. But I will shout out two names prior to the late 90s here in terms of the best third line centers in Canucks history. I'm going to shout out one of the better names in Canucks history, Bobby Lalonde. Okay, Kyle, I know you want to name your son Bobby Bowen. So maybe you can look to Bobby Lalonde as some inspiration here. But he played for the Canucks for about 5 seasons. He was over a half point a game player, and he was the third line center on the team in the 70s. I also wrote down Ivan Halinka, who was here for 2 seasons in the early 80s, was part of that Canucks team that went to the 82 finals. He seemed to have slotted as a third line center on those Canuck teams as well. And I think he still has the record or he was one of the oldest players to be named Rookie of the Year or something like that. But those are kind of my old school names of the best third line centers in Canucks history. before I kind of get into the newer age, is there anyone else you can think of in terms of an old timer who should have been named one of the best third line centers in Canucks history?
I think the term old timer is a bit strong, but at the end of the day, maybe I'm just being a little petty because I'm kind of falling under the category based on the name that I'm going to bring up and the timeline. And it's a bit of a hypothetical, but and it's one of those things. We made the joke earlier, right? Like, who could have been one of the best third line centers? Mark Schwannard, right? Maybe that guy. How about? And I don't know the data, and I don't know how much he played for the Canucks and what role he was playing, and blah blah blah. But if it worked out during that time where the Canucks were a little bit deeper, just a little bit deeper, how about Michael Pekka?
Yeah, Michael Pekka was, again, not with this team for as long as he could have been, right?
Yeah.
But he was, started his career here, and honestly, like when I was growing up, was one of my favorite players in the NHL who wasn't a
Mm,
Canuck. I love Michael Pekka back in the day, and I think when he was playing for the Islanders in Buffalo, like I didn't even know he was a Canuck, right? But
yeah.
yeah, he could have been up there. So, and that was the thing too. It's hard to find guys who have been in the third line center spot for a while because those guys just don't stay on the same team for a long time.
Ooh, yep.
So I'll kind of rip off the 5 players here who I think are the best third line centers in Canucks history. Let's go with number 5. I got Brad Richardson, part of the teams in the
Oh,
2014-2015 season. Yeah, that's
that's
what
where
I'm
we're
talking
starting.
about, man. I'm talking. It's a lot of these guys haven't been around a long time, right? Where they don't stay in that role for a long time. But I got
Oh
Brad
my
Richardson up here.
god.
How about this for a throwback? I got Kyle Wellwood, buddy.
Oh yeah.
Kyle Wellwood. Some people call him Kyle Well-fed. He
Whoa.
was tearing it up, for the Canucks there. Crazy good face-off winning percentage for the Canucks in the 2009 2010 era. Matt Sundin was kind of like an option for third line center, but he played more second line. Pavel Dimitra took a lot of face-offs for the Canucks. There's a lot of interesting centers for the Canucks at that time. Rest
Mhm.
in peace, Pavel Dimitra, ultimate legend. So Kyle Wellwood, Brad Richardson, not the big names you're expecting to hear for third line centers, eh, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to start off the episode. Top 5 top 5 list for your Vancouver Canucks, and we're gonna start number 5 off with Brad Richardson, and I'll touch on Brad Richardson just a bit. Like, that guy was a solid hockey player for a pretty long time.
Yeah,
A
he's
pretty
underrated.
long
He put
time.
up some points for the Canucks too.
No, he's just a good guy. Good guy to have in the room, and he plays the game well, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel as if he won a cup, right, with LA? Like, I'm not gonna say he's a big part of that team, but am I right on that? Who knows? Anyways, Locked On Canucks,
Good
your team
question.
every day. Your Canucks every day. Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen. Yo, Matt Sundin, man. I remember the Canucks signing Matt Sundin, and it was rumored in the offseason, but we had to wait like what, 5, 6 months for it to actually happen. And I was at the mall. I was Guilford Mall. Shout out to Surrey. I was at the mall when it happened, when news broke, and I ditched my mom because I was a young chap. I ditched my mom and went straight to Jersey City, which at the time was like the podcast that wasn't being recorded every single day. Like the greatest sports podcast being recorded every day. Just head on over to Jersey City. Shout out to the boy Aiden. He worked there for a while. And I don't know who else was on shift that day, but I knew the guy by name because every time my parents went to the mall or my mom went to the mall, I'd only spend time at Jersey City and EB games just to talk sports. Anyways, I was there. It was a big moment, and I really thought the Canucks were winning the Stanley Cup. Anyways, carry on with your damn list, okay?
All right, I'll get to the last 2 here. So number 3, I have Trevor Linden. So quickly on Linden, you look at how many faceoffs he took for the Canucks. He was actually more of a right winger earlier in his career, and then became a top 6 center for those Canucks. During the glory years there in the '90s. When he came back in the 2000s, he was more in a bottom 6 third line center role. He was actually the fourth line center at some points. He was the second line center at some points. He was kind of all over the place after he rejoined the Canucks in the early 2000s. Kyle, number 2 might surprise you. I have Henrik Sedin. But think about it, right? Like back in the early 2000s, you had Andrew Castles, you
Ooh.
had Brendan Morrison, and you had Henrik Sedin, right? Henrik Sedin was a third line center on that team. Still figuring it out in the NHL, but he was putting up, 30 to 40 points alongside Daniel Sedin there in a third line role. And he was actually like one of the more long tenured fourth line centers. I kind of had him like looking back at the
Third line
stats in
center,
that
third
fourth
line
line
centers.
role. What's that? Sorry.
I thought you said fourth line centers.
Oh, I
Third
might have
line
said
centers,
fourth.
right? Yeah. It's all good. It's all
Third
good.
line centers, yeah.
Honestly, I would have let it
Um,
slide, but since it was Henrik, like if you were like bringing up the list and the category and you said Brad Richardson and you were talking about third line centers and then you said fourth line center and you rambled because you made a mistake because we're all humans, I would have let it slide. But it was Henrik Sedin. We're not going to do that to Hank. Okay.
no, can't do
Anyways,
that to
carry on.
Henrik.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, my point was that he was in a third line center role for the Canucks
Yeah.
during some really good years, and we talked about it off the top, right? If you're going to win Stanley Cups, if you're going to compete, you need to have a solid third line center. And even though Sedin took some criticism early in their careers, it's hard to argue that they weren't, good third line centers. They were overqualified towards, the 2003, 2004 era. So, but yeah, I found that interesting too. Like Henrik Sedin, one of the longest tenured third line centers in Canucks history. That's not like something I expected to find. And number one's no surprise for me. It's Manny Malhotra. It was really only 2 years where he was a third line center of the Canucks, but I think in terms of the prototypical third line center you want, score some goals, but mainly win a lot of faceoffs, take on a lot of tough matchups. Malhotra fit that role perfectly. There's not many other Canucks who did it. And I'm going to give an honorable mention to Artem Chubarov. He had a season or two where he was kind of third on the Canucks in faceoffs and ice time among centers, but often he was a fourth line center. So,
Yeah.
I think he's kind of beloved by, Canucks fans our age, Kyle, but for me, he just wasn't a third line center for long enough.
And and a name that wasn't on that list, and I don't remember how he broke through with the Canucks and what position he honed in early on in his Canucks career, but Ryan Kesler, like, I wonder what he was doing when he broke in and where he was playing, and yeah, just one of those names. Okay, so you said Artem Chubarov, you said Henrik Sedin, you also said Manny Malhotra. We got to touch on Manny Malhotra just a bit because the Canucks were so good, and he was only on the team when 2010, 2011, then 2011, 2012, and that's when the Canucks kind of were like, "Yo, you're not playing anymore, right?" Am I right on that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, in 2010, 2011, yeah, it was so obvious that on a healthy Canuck team with those players and those centers, Kessler above him and Henrik at number one, that he just fit that role so well. And credit to him because for all the games he did play, he was so damn important because he was so good. He just focused on that role, didn't try doing anything too extra. And when we say he was doing a good job at the dot, he was one of the best face-off men in the league, like elite face. Like he was in the top of his category, top of his class, and that's definitely an advantage. It's one of those things. Pius Suter, I don't know if I think he's like an average face-off man, right? He's average.
Yeah, he's a little under 50% for his career.
Dude, like, get it up, man. Work out those forearms, man. Me
Get
and
it
Trevor have
up.
already talked about it many times, how to work out the forearms. Trevor, how do you work out the forearms, man?
I do.
Yeah.
Aside from no, we can't say it
Whoa,
on
whoa,
here.
whoa.
Aside from that, doing wrist curls. Usually I have the bar, and you just like put your elbows on your knees, and then you curl with your
Dude,
wrist.
come on, man.
Great
Come
for
on,
face off.
Trevor. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
How
You know
could
how you
this
do it,
happen?
man? You know how you do it, bro? And this is what you learn in Surrey, right? Growing up in Surrey, real Canadian superstore. I know we're running short on time here, but we got to spread some love here. You can work out your wrists by carrying other people's groceries out of the stroller and into people's trunks. Just offer, man. It's something that
Yeah,
we should
no,
all do. Sharing is caring, man. For real, we're out here to help each other out. When you really ask yourself what life is all about, Begsy, in those moments, it really comes down to spending time with your loved ones, and number two, helping people out.
100%, and I could do a better job at that. Very, very quickly before break. The reason I didn't have Ryan Kesler in the top five is just looking at the numbers. I kind of saw him as more fourth line center, jump into second line center, and he did struggle for a bit there when he was a sophomore, even as a bottom six center. So, like another guy, took us some time to develop, but obviously he figured it out, and he's one of the best centers in Canucks history. Let's talk about some of the best third line centers in the NHL heading into next season on the other side. But first, let me tell you, newborn life, it has me short on sleep. It's harder to work out and eat healthy like I used to. Once upon a time, I haven't been able to get my wrist curls in, okay? But that's why I have a hard time living life without some AG1 in the morning, okay? Since I've been drinking AG1, I've noticed an overall feeling of sustained energy, support for mental clarity, and focus. And I need that focus to bring you the goods here on Locked On Canucks. AG1, they use a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, whole food source nutrients. That's science, baby. And Kyle, you and I were over the 30 years old mark. I know you and I need a product like AG1 to keep us feeling like we're only 29. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out.
People, before we get back to the show, baby, I gotta tell you that new episodes of Locked On Canucks will be available wherever you stream podcasts and on YouTube at 4:20 p.m. for no reason at all, okay? New episodes every day at 4:20 p.m. Again, wherever you stream podcasts and on YouTube. Let's get back to the show. Okay. We back on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks, every day. Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen. Just doing our thing, man. Shout out to Surrey, shout out to Kelowna, shout out to the interior. Bro, to be honest, we just heard the message, right? And it's for no reason at all, but I think some people connect the dots for the wrong reasons. It is what it is. It's not their fault. They just heard it. It's Vancouver. They can connect those dots, right? New episodes of Locked On Canucks everywhere at 4:20 p.m., right? But little do people know that's just because of time and when we record this and how we have to get it out and the schedule and broadcasting and the rights and there's a lot of little things behind the scenes people don't understand. But if they're going to connect the dots to why we do it, I got to bring this up, especially in this time. We got a couple more weeks of summer left. September, October may be hot as well. If you're smoking anything, throw your butts out, okay? In a proper place. Don't throw them on the ground. It shouldn't just be a summer thing. For real, you should be doing it all the time. For real. But that's another reminder, okay? 100%. Don't be littering, and especially don't be littering that way. Anyways, Kyle Bowen, Trevor Beggs, Locked On Canucks. I got something else to talk about that's really important involving a fantasy football draft, my girlfriend performing on Friday, and me having to decide. But we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes because I need your help, Beggsy. Okay? Let's talk about the best third line centers in hockey right now. I'm gonna have to lead with the Canuck angle. What are the odds? Do it like your FanDuel right now. Okay? What are the odds that Pius Suter at the end of this year 1 with the Vancouver Canucks, can be in the top 3 best third line centers in hockey? I know. Heroic question, but let's spread some optimism here, okay?
Well, you want me to spread some optimism when you ask a question like that? I think the odds of
Be
that
honest.
happening are probably around 5%, and that might be optimistic. I just think
Okay.
there's a lot of good third line centers in the NHL, and look at the Canucks heading into last season. I mean, technically, their third line center was Bo Horvat or Elias Pettersson, right? Like it was Miller, Pettersson, and Besser playing center. Like it was hard to beat that 1-2-3 punch, right? Obviously, the Canucks had other holes, other problems, but they had 3 really good centers, and a lot of teams are in a similar boat.
But come on,
So
to be honest, like, do you think like guys like Miller and Horvat had a chance to be like a really good third line center, like that prototypical, like, everyone needs to play your role. You need to do your job. You just can't be that type of player playing center. You're offensive. You got to have a bit of everything. We just brought up Manny Malhotra. I'm sure you're going to bring up some players here too that have just better respect for only being utilized in some games as a defensive center, playing that role, mastering that time in and time out. I don't think that was the case with Horvat and Miller at all. Like maybe Pettersson, but I get your logic. I'm just saying. I'm curious to hear these names though, because I know one's coming from LA possibly, and that guy's probably the guy. But I'm just curious to hear the names and have this debate.
all right, I'll rip through it quickly. But yeah, I mean, looking at Horvat, Miller, Pettersson last year, they're all on 3 separate lines at even strength, right? So they're one of them's a third line center, one way or another. So I made a list of 12 here. I'll go number 12. It's either Braden Shen or Kevin Hayes in St. Louis. 11, John Gabriel Pajot with the New York Islanders. Number 10, Jordan Stahl. Game's fallen off a bit, but he's still a pretty solid third line center for Carolina. Number 9, Ross Colton just joined the Colorado Avalanche. Number 8, Eric Holla, solid third line center behind Heischer and Hughes in New Jersey. Number 7, I have either Andrew Kopp or JT Compher, whichever one of those guys. Both making a lot of money, but both those guys, pretty solid third line centers. Number 6, Yanni Gourde with the Seattle Kraken. Number 5, he was just with the Florida Panthers, went to the Stanley Cup final, a youngster, Anton Lundell. Number 4, Matt Duchene, probably the steal of free agency in Dallas. In the top 3, I have with Calgary. And again, a lot of hate for Calgary, but one of their third line centers is going to be either Mikhail Backlund or Nazem Kadri. Both those guys are behind Elias Lindholm. So one of those guys is a pretty damn good third line center. Second, I have with the Vegas Golden Knights, William Karlsson, and number one, Kyle, you knew it off the top, Philip Deneau of the LA Kings. So again, that's a list of centers I ripped through pretty quick. A lot of those guys are making at least a few $1,000,000 a season, right? You look at Pius Suter with the Canucks, he's making 1.6 million next season. Definitely on the budget end. And there's so many other centers I didn't mention, like Nicholas Backstrom, technically a third line center right now towards the end of his career. Adam Lowry with Winnipeg. Lots of guys are making a lot of money as a third line center, and that's something that the Canucks, out of necessity, don't have right now.
Dude, man, I think the Canucks should come out with a shirt that says "It's Pius" in the middle of the shirt.
Maybe we should come up with a shirt that says it's Pius.
Put all those letters together, right? People won't get it twisted. They'll just they'll just they'll just think about Pius, right? Nothing else. Anyways, Locked On Canucks, your team every day. You listed all those names, and yeah, I don't think you're lying / being pessimistic when saying Pius Suter has no chance of being that dude entering the top 5 in that category, because like there's just a lot of talented players, and a lot of those talented players that you mentioned, not the Andrew Cops or the who else did he mention? Oh, JT Compher, but a lot of the guys around them play on good teams as well.
Yeah,
Like great
exactly.
teams.
Ross,
Like
Ross
they,
Colton going
yeah,
from
exactly.
Tampa Bay, who won the cup, to Colorado, who just won a cup, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think there's some good names on that list, and some older guys too, right? Jordan Stahl, Braden Shen, Kevin Hayes, JB Pajot. Those are
Yeah.
all older guys. Matt Duchene
Oh,
as
makes
well.
sense.
So
Makes sense. Is there another
um,
level? Is there another level to Pius Suter? Again, I'm just honing back to the Canucks show, right? West Coast bias. We got to talk about it. And, we've been very optimistic the whole time. Well, maybe I have been just overly optimistic, because if I'm not optimistic about the season coming up, I'm going to get bored really quick, right? Just getting too old in this thing called life to spend too much time with the same stuff, and just thinking the Canucks would be like horrible next season when there's a chance of that, because, recency bias. I use that quite a bit. They haven't really learned how to win. There's not that culture here. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, where am I going with this? Oh, yeah. Best case scenario for the Canucks, right? They got to take the next step, maybe take 2. And if that's going to happen, they got to be healthy. And Pius Suter, he's one of those guys who have to exceed that number that he's getting paid, especially on a capped out team. Like, we need guys to exceed their value. And I think he's a candidate based on opportunity, based on role, because the roles, like, it's probably easier to do your role and play your role when you know your role. Like, look who's ahead of you. So he has that. There's peace in that. And again, the winger set. Maybe there's more
yeah.
to
So
Pius Suter.
when I look at Pius Suter and the ceiling for him, it's maybe he can be a half point a game guy who has about 20 goals a season. The thing about him is I don't see him as a great playmaker. Even when he played with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, he has the same amount of goals and assists pretty much in his NHL career right now.
Mhm.
When you watch the tape, he's a guy that likes to go to the net. He's not a guy who's often, making crazy nice passes.
Yeah.
So smart hockey player, has
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
nose for the net, has a nose for creating offense. But to expect him to be this like playmaking third line center isn't really realistic for him. But I could see
Mhm.
him, again, that's why I kind of liked him with a guy like Connor Garland. Another reason why I suggested that Mikheyev, Suter, Garland third line. I think Garland can drive the line and be that playmaking force, and I think Mikheyev and Suter can capitalize. So yeah, I
Okay.
think best case scenario for him is he's a great penalty killer, like he's been the last couple seasons. He at least holds his head above water a bit at even strength, and maybe he chips in 20 goals and 45 points. That's probably the ceiling for Pius Suter, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that ceiling of point usage, maybe not being like ultra efficient / getting the most out of him. But again, if we want to maximize his point usage, or I don't even know why am I talking like that? Like I'm some fancy stat doctor, anyways. Because there's a chance, like you said, you described, Garland as a play driver all off season. Hughes Suter, he's evenly good offensively at both things, blah, blah, blah. And there's also that chance, we talked about Mikheyev, but there's also a good chance that Brock Besser is a third line winger. Like, just the way it is, just the way it's just jam packed. It is. It is. And maybe the points go up if that's the case. A lot to think about, man. We're thinking way too much on this episode. We're way over time. It's the middle of well, it's actually almost the end of August. And man, oh man, I'm proud of you, man. I know we're not there yet, but when training camp hits, it's gonna be like I'm gonna have to look at you and be like, how did we do that? How did we just spend that much time talking about stuff that wasn't even close? You got what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Like, this is we
Content creation and the work that goes into it hits another level in the middle of summer when nothing's going on. But like I said, we love what we do, and we're here for you listening right now. So let us know in the comments. We mentioned some of the best third line centers in Canucks history earlier. Let us know if you agree with the list, who you think is the best third line center in Canucks history, and maybe in terms of NHL right now, who the best third line centers are. Let us know in the comments who you think is the best third line center in the NHL today. Like Kyle said, we're in overtime. We got to get to Comment Corner. That's coming up next on Locked On Canucks.
Okay, people, before we get back to the show, let's tell you about this week's schedule, okay? Yesterday, we dropped an episode. We talked about the quiet dressing room and how it can no longer be quiet. Today, we dropped this episode on third line centers. And on Friday, yes, Friday, no episodes on Wednesday, no episodes on Thursday. On Friday, we're back talking about Canuck players that remind us of some NFL players. Okay, it's the summer. We got to take some time off. And it's the summer. We got to have some fun. Let us know in the comments below if any of the Canucks roster players remind you of any NFL players today, right? Okay, you get it? Sort of? Maybe not? Who knows? Let's get back to the show. Okay. We back on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. Shout out to all the new subscribers. Shout out to the OGs, Hayden Cluton, Matt. They're interested in a fantasy hockey league involving the people here. That's something that Trevor Beggs, the parent of two, has to lead. So maybe it's gonna happen. Maybe it is. Who knows? Maybe it isn't. I'm sorry. Maybe, who knows? But it's in the air. Maybe it'll be produced and maybe it'll be finalized. We got to talk about it more. I think that'd be kind of cool. I'd co-GM with you. Actually,
no. We got to go against each other.
Yeah, we got to go
No
against
chance,
each other.
No chance.
Yeah, F
no
you,
chance.
dude, for real.
I'm X-naying your co-GM offer.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to make my life a little bit easier. Hey, speaking of
Not a
which,
chance.
okay, before we get to Comment Corner, the best part of the show, dude, what do I do, man? My girl's singing on Friday. And I said I would go because she's my girl. Like, you got to support the girl chasing her dreams. I'm there. I'm loyal. But it lines up with the fantasy football draft. Like, I'll be able to probably be a part of like the first 7 rounds. But then it's going to be somewhat up in the air afterwards. Like, I'm going to have to get some live input, then text in my picks. It's going to be different. I think I'm bailing out on my girl, bro. Dude, perseverance, right? I don't know. I don't even know why.
You can't do it, man. I think you had a good game plan. If you can swing it where you make it for the first 7 rounds of your draft, you get those key picks in, you get your key starters in, and then you text or call on your picks the rest of the way.
Man. Are you serious? This is where I'm going in my life. Like I'm not gonna how often fantasy football drafts happen? What's the answer? For a normal person, once a year.
Well, once a year, yeah.
You know me, man. I got this. You would say I have the second best batch of bros in the world. So I'm gonna miss out on seeing them for a couple songs.
Well, isn't your girl performing again in a couple nights?
I
mean,
got
you
4
could.
performances. That's what okay.
Yeah.
She got 4 performances in the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Okay, so I feel like there's a chance. I don't know, man. This is something else, man. I didn't sign up for this, man. This is something else, man. You know what I wish?
At the end of the day, what do you love more, fantasy football or your girl? That's what comes down to it, fortunately.
Dude, my girl
don't have to answer on air. I'm just saying.
My girl will be there on Saturday. The fantasy football draft won't. But okay, Trevor, man. You know what I want to happen? I want this to happen, okay? I want her to call me today in a couple hours and just be like, "Hey, baby, I was thinking about you, and I want you to follow your dreams. Like we got our whole lives together. I'm gonna have a million shows. You know what I'm saying? But I know what your fantasy is. So go do it." Anyways, Locked On Canucks, your team / your Canucks every day. Let's get to the best part of the show, Comment Corner.
Welcome to Comment Corner, powered by Paraphrasing.
This comment comes from our friend Canucks for Life.
I think the organization needs to do the smart thing and listen to what Bo Horvat said about Petey. Make him the captain and make him the captain now.
Shout out to Canucks for Life. one of the OGs as well. One of the reasons why you and I are here. But when I read this comment, I got a little scared because I know there could be a little truth to that, but I don't think the Canucks should base it off of like there should like when they're having the meeting about this, they shouldn't pull back and say, "Hey, look at what Horvat said. Pettersson should be the guy. He's in that room." Dude, all that losing that happened in that room, you can't take any of that as reference into this decision. It's just the truth. Just the truth. Am I right?
Well, I mean, when we had this debate a couple episodes ago, and shout out to the Everydayers, you might have heard that. Go check it out if you haven't heard it. We debated whether Pettersson or Hughes should be the next captain. I chose Pettersson, you chose Hughes. So hard not to stick to my guns here. That being said, I mean, yeah, what Horvat, the previous captain of this team, said, who's no longer with this team, I think you should be taking that with a grain of salt. I mean, when Horvat's here, wasn't a winning organization. At the end of the day, as much as I vouched for Pettersson in the last episode, I think it has to come down to what Pettersson and Hughes want. I think, the two of them are grown men. They're the leaders of this team. I think they can kind of figure it out together who the next captain should be. Maybe they get in a nice Canadian standoff, even though neither of them are Canadian, and they're just like, you should have it. No, you should have it.
No,
We'll see how it goes. But I think it's got to be figured out between those two players.
I don't want that, man. This is like, who wants it? Who wants it the most? Out of those two guys, who wants it the most? And give it to that person because the Canucks are in a really, really interesting, polarizing situation where I think the fan base, they've been patient, they've wanted patience, and they respect that is needed when it comes to transition. But I feel as if the fan base is also owed not like a complete miracle, but a bit of a fast forward based on who's here. Like there has to be a chance for this team to take 2 steps just based on who's on the room. They don't have to give up no assets, blah, 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 but they get it together based on who's in the room. And I think that's fast forwarded even more if they pick the right captain so he can be the person that's leading from the top, being the glue guy, holding people accountable. It's just one of the pieces. We talked about Pius when it comes to being one of the pieces. I think like getting the camaraderie all the way up, like just from being a losing team who has a dressing room that's, they have mutual respect for each other. Like it's all good. It's all love. But let's just ramp it up when it comes to the camaraderie. And I think that's a little easier if they pick the right leader and do it ASAP. And that leader is able to, just do the most. And both those guys are strong candidates. They really are. Okay. It is what it is. I don't know where I went with that ramble there. I'm stressing, man. Okay. Fantasy football or the
Ooh, that is a tough one, man. I wish I was here for like one more day because your draft's Friday, right? Which is the day I leave.
Dude,
for
I would have
Ottawa.
sent you. I would have sent you, man.
Yeah,
I would have sent
I
you.
would
man.
have filled it for you and gotten it done, no problem.
Dude.
I mean, I just drafted my team. I showed you yesterday, and I feel pretty good about it. My first 2 QB Superflex league. Let's go, baby! Fantasy season, and you're not going to hear too much fantasy football talk in the show, but maybe a little bit. If you're a fantasy football person, have fun with your draft. But whether you're an everydayer or an occasional listener, or if it's your first time listening, we love you and appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks. Coming up, Kyle and I, we got to maybe pre-record an episode or 2 because I am going away next week. We want to talk about the Canucks draft from the 2010s, ranking them, looking back at them a little bit. We'll get to that, but for now, I'm Trevor Beggs. That guy's Kyle Bowen, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.